Here's Jordan Peterson to claim that you need God to explain gratitude.
I recognize that I could not come on the train here, have a really interesting discussion, meet Justin again, have a nice glass of cool water, without a load of other people doing it for me. That gratitude, which is one of the things that you quite rightly put into your book, it gives good place to it, and it's very important. That doesn't come from anything religious, unless you say because I was brought up a Christian it came from there, but I don't base it on that anymore.
What do you think it comes from?
I think it comes from the same place all other emotions come from, the limbic system. Also, I know there's a ginger kid in the corner of the screen. He's the one who uploaded this clip.
I think it comes from a recognition that I've done a lot of meditation. I meditated every day for 30 years, and I think this has something to do with it. But it's observing the inner consequences of different ways of confronting the world. And I'm much more in recent years in the habit of waking up in the morning, even if it's raining in January in England, and looking out and going, oh, and it's a feeling of gratitude, not gratitude towards God or towards anybody or anything, just free-floating gratitude. That seems to have a positive consequence. I set the day up better, and it's kind of self-perpetuating. It pops up again and again.
Do you think you can just have gratitude in general, or must gratitude always be given towards something and ultimately God?
That's a good question. That goes back to our discussion about acting things out. Like, gratitude is something you feel towards something.
Yeah, if it's a nice warm day, I feel gratitude toward the sun, or even toward the warmth itself. It can be felt towards something. It doesn't have to be felt towards someone.
And you can say, well, I don't feel it towards anything in particular. And I would say, all right, well, the diffuse nothing that you feel it towards serves in your psychological hierarchy as your equivalent of God.
I don't feel it toward a diffuse nothing, though. I feel it toward the cause of that for which I am grateful, or toward the thing I'm grateful for itself. If I feel gratitude toward the sun for the nice weather, is the sun my equivalent of God? It's pretty easy for Peterson to prove that someone believes in God by simply redefining God to refer to whatever beliefs or values a person does have. Peterson has previously defined God as one's deepest instinct, rather than a timeless, spaceless, disembodied mind like many Christian apologists define God. Peterson himself seems to be an atheist relative to that much more common conception of God.
No, but it's gratitude. This morning, for example, I looked out and it was so green. We've had frosts and it's been white the last few days, and it was green this morning, and it was just gratitude to the universe, if you like. It's not really God because it's not a creator, it's not anything I can pray to. I know.
Why feel gratitude towards it then?
I don't know.
Because I appreciate its consequences. A creator, or something you can pray to, is not the only kind of thing that has consequences that you can appreciate.
But I find
That's fine.
I know that you tackle in this book that happiness is not an ultimate good, and I struggle this
it's just not an ultimate goal.
Oh, okay,
I didn't say it wasn't an ultimate
all
good.
right, all right, okay.
There's a big difference between those things.
You're right. You picked me up correctly on that. Nevertheless, we are happiness-seeking creatures, and I have found through practice and growing older that acting gratitude, thinking gratitude, feeling gratitude makes me happier and seems to rub off on other people.
So I don't think we are happiness-seeking creatures.
Now they're both talking about gratitude like they make a decision to feel it. When I feel gratitude, it's not because I choose to in order to be happy. If I feel gratitude, it's because the emotion just erupts unbidden. It's not something I do for the sake of some other emotion or to achieve some other goal.
And I think it's a low goal. Not because there's something wrong with being happy, because, thank God if you get to be happy now and then. But I don't think that that's what we seek. I think we seek a meaning that's deep enough to sustain us through tragedy.
I think that's only the case if we actually experience tragedy or expect to. Not everyone does, like very young children, for example. I don't think it's something we all do, and some folks may not even have any desire to sustain themselves through tragedy.
And that is way different.
Do you know, when I hit tragedy is too strong a word, I think... but when horrible things happen to me, or I feel or I read some terrible thing going on in the world, yes, those are tragedies going on in the world, my response is, nothing matters, it's all empty and meaningless. This is how the world is. Get used to it. Get on with it, girl.
That sounds like a very Zen Buddhist way of dealing with
it is.
meaning.
Well, it's a paradoxical way, though.
It is kind of paradoxical.
The first part of that is nihilistic, and the second part isn't.
Peterson has a point here, because what exactly is she trying to get herself to get on with if nothing matters? Where I disagree with him is in his apparent belief that whatever it is she intends to get on with is her own personal God.
So how do you reconcile those two things?
Which,
Why get on with it, girl?
Because, well, here's another thing. I've often done this with my students. Let's suppose you become nihilistic. Nothing matters. There's no point in doing that. I mean, I think we live in a pointless universe. What are you going to do? And I say to them, like William James in his wonderful thing about getting up in the morning, but that's a slightly different point that he makes there. But I say to them, okay, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, think it's all pointless. There's no point in doing anything. Now, what are you going to do? Well, actually, you're going to need to go to the loo. You're going to get out of bed and you're going to go to the bathroom. And when you're there, you'll think, actually, I'm hungry. I think I want to go down to the kitchen. I probably should put my slippers on. Why don't I get dressed? You go and have something to eat. And then you think, I'm bored. And you go to university and get into your lectures. And, we are not creatures who will just not do anything.
I agree, but because that's the case, you don't really need to tell yourself to get on with it. You won't be able to help but get on with whatever you feel compelled to do. And that, I think, is why not everyone needs some grand cosmic meaning to life. Some folks will just live out their natural, immediate compulsions.
To me, to go through that process, which I've done in the past a lot, and it's just natural now, is a very positive way of living. To accept the meaningless and ultimate emptiness of everything, and accept that this creature here, this thing, this evolved creature just will get on with life.
But you're not accepting the meaninglessness of it, even by going through those actions that you described.
You don't think so?
Not at all,
because
you're acting as if those things are meaningful.
Yes.
I don't follow my compulsions because I think they're meaningful. I do it because I can't help but indulge them. They're not even a choice. I don't think I could abstain from following them if I wanted to.
So I am. I'm
Right.
acting
Okay.
as though
So
those
let-
things
Are
are
you pretending that they're meaningful?
Pardon?
Are you pretending that they're meaningful?
No, I'm not pretending. I'm. My way of putting it would be that those meanings are constructed by myself and others.
They're personal
and they're
meanings rather than-
because of the kind of creatures we are, because of the meme
But they're not
plexes,
constructed.
I'd like to hear
Hunger
Jordan's
isn't
response to this.
constructed. Neither is your desire to use the loo. None of that's constructed.
Nor is indulging those desires necessarily motivated by meaning. It's not exactly clear to me what Peterson even means by meaning. He seems to use the term so broadly that it just means that you expect to feel some satisfaction as a result of doing whatever you are motivated to do. Is that what he thinks religion is? Just doing things that you think are worth doing?
No, but the fact that there is a loo is part
Yes.
of culture.
Yeah, well, thank
And the
God
fact
for that.
Yeah.
But see...
Oh, you thank God, would you, for that? Sorry, that's a poor joke.
Well, you see, so imagine this. You have the proximal meanings that you described that are sort of a priori, right?
Yeah.
They're handed to you. You might consider them as needs or drives, although they're
Yes.
not. They're personalities. That's not the right way of conceptualizing them. But then there's the intermingling of all those needs and drives, let's say, and that constitutes a new layer of structure, because it isn't just that you have to eat and that you have to use the washroom and that you have to have something to drink and that you have to be warm enough or cool enough to survive. It's that you have to do all those things at the same time in a situation where you're going to have to propagate that across time, and you're going to have to do it with a bunch of other people. And it's always been like that.
What does that have to do with finding meaning that sustains you through tragedy? Peterson seems to think that you ought to find meaning, but also that everything you voluntarily do is motivated by meaning, which if true makes the search for meaning pointless because everything you do is already a consequence of a meaning that you've apparently already found. I know he thinks that we also search for some more abstract meaning, that indulging the proximal meanings serves further down the road, but some people are very satisfied by merely indulging the proximal meanings.
And so what that means is that out of those proximal meanings, higher meanings arise. And you might say, well, those meanings are arbitrary, and I would think those are religious
I wouldn't
meanings.
say they are arbitrary, but I would say they were constructed. And it's very interesting. Reading your book...
What do you mean by constructed?
Well, they are a consequence of mimetic evolution, of the language that people are brought up in, the culture they live in, the arguments they have. I mean,
What about the biology that they're given?
well, we start with the biology, and the memes build on top of that.
The
Culture
memes
builds
are
on top.
biology too.
Peterson believes in Jungian archetypes. Carl Jung believed that ideas are hardwired into our brains rather than things we come up with that are influenced by our experiences of our environment. I don't buy this because while we're not born completely tabula rasa, we're not incapable of mimetic innovation either. It's hard to discern which of our ideas that seem to show up across cultures are ones we are born with, and which are the consequence of a shared environment. Most contemporary psychologists don't take the idea of archetypes very seriously because of how difficult and sometimes impossible it is to separate which shared ideas are a consequence of the fact that we all have human brains and which are the consequence of the fact that we all live on the same planet. This idea has led Peterson to some very goofy conclusions. For example, he believes that cave paintings of two snakes coiling around each other are not a consequence of the fact that that snakes actually do that, and someone saw it and decided to paint it, but rather because DNA has somehow caused our brains to have an innate sense of its shape, and that's why prehistoric people painted something that is shaped like a double helix.
Well, by definition, they are, well...
See, this is the thing.
I would follow Dawkins in saying, well, talk about genes as biology, talk about memes as culture. That's all I meant by dividing that. But let me say this.
Yeah, but I don't accept that division.
But I want to get back to what we're saying about meaning.
And that's Peterson's problem. He can't accept that some of our ideas come from experiencing the world around us rather than coming exclusively from inside our own brains.
Reading your book made me think a lot about what you mean by meaning, and your claim that we should have a meaningful life or strive for a meaningful life, that meaningfulness is important. And I kept asking myself, do I live that way? What meanings does my life have? And, you know, if I think of something like, well, most of my striving goes into writing my books. And is that meaningful? And again, I have the same response when I ask myself that question. It's just what this body does.
Then you should listen to the body and stop listening to the thing that's criticizing it.
And what would the body say?
It would say, write your book and try to be as clear as you possibly can
that's
about
what I
it.
do. And that's
right,
exactly what I do.
What I said at the beginning is that the atheist types act out a religious structure and criticize it.
Peterson conceives of religious structure so broadly that it's not clear that it means anything more than people doing things that they think are worth doing and abstaining from doing things that they don't think are worth doing. That's not the same religious structure that atheist types are criticizing.
Religious structure? We come to this big question now.
Let me get to this question, because I did want to get to this, because you have a fascinating part in your book, Jordan, where you do say this. You're simply not addressing atheists. You say you're simply not an atheist in your actions, and it is your actions.
Or if you are, look out.
And it is your actions that most accurately reflect your religious beliefs. What do you mean by that? Why are you saying that no one is really an atheist deep down?
I didn't say no one was. Okay. I said that most of the people who claim to be atheists aren't. So this is why I like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, because Raskolnikov tried to act like an atheist. Right? He took the ideas that were floating around, Dostoevsky took the ideas that were floating around in the late 1800s, which are still the ideas that we're discussing today. One most fundamental idea, I suppose, being after Nietzsche's announcement of the death of God, that if there is no God, then anything is permitted.
Slavoj Žižek once pointed out that actually the opposite is true. If you can convince yourself, and especially if you can convince other people, that what you want to do is really what God wants you to do, it is only then that you can really get away with everything. That's the only way you can be guaranteed to escape any consequences being imposed upon you by your conscience and or your community, no matter what you do. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.